Hi, welcome to our Into the Word study for this week. We thank you for joining us as we continue with our week 2 of our Life and Times of Daniel, as we have the chance to get a little bit more into this topic of a restless night's sleep. And so as we get started today, is that we want to begin by kind of reflecting and contemplating just a little bit about our own lives and what these things reveal. So I want to ask, what keeps you up at night? Either, present in your current, life situation, or maybe in the past. What keeps you up at night and why? You're welcome to go ahead and pause and reflect a bit or discuss with somebody if you're meeting together with somebody else, watching this with someone. Go ahead and think, what is it that keeps me up at night? Now, hopefully your answers weren't just kind of like, oh, I shouldn't have had that before bed. Or, well, I had so many trips to the bathroom. No, that's not what I'm looking for here. The question that I have is that what kind of things keep you up? The things that somehow prevent your mind from being at rest and peace to be able to enjoy a good night's sleep. I think some of us, when we think about all of the stressors of our day, we have concerns about work and all of the frantic pace there. We have concerns about our kids or our aging parents or our friends, or what are we going to do about this bill or that bill. I think some people, they stay up because of the frantic pace of their day, that finally it's that time and just their mind just won't shut off because there's still so much that is surging through. That others look back over the day and they begin to think about, oh, I forgot to do that. And oh, that didn't turn out very well. Or that others may not just look back, that they may look forward to the things that are there of like, oh, I need to be there tomorrow. And what else do I need to do? Oh, I need to remember to. And all of a sudden, there's this concern, this stress, this worry, this fear, that there are things that keep us up at night. And why do they? Because many times they're things that are outside of our control. That, maybe we might have an influence on them, but do we have ultimate control over everything that happens at work? No. Do we have ultimate control about our children's life or our aging parents' health? No. That they're out of our control, but we still feel that there is just that stress and worry and fear. For others, it's that concern, the things that we feel that we failed upon, or the things that we're upset about, those things that we feel that we're not living up to expectations, or others aren't meeting our expectations. That we begin to see that there's much there that sometimes keeps us awake. And I think in some ways that provides a window into the important things that we put in life. What do we allow ourselves to be stressed by? That what is it that is there that maybe we're putting a greater importance or a greater concern than even we're willing to admit to ourselves? That not only do we find ourselves not able to busy ourselves or distract ourselves when it's time to go to bed, but even when it's finally that we fall asleep, that sometimes those same things begin to come out in our dreams. That when that unconscious self begins to reveal the things that we are truly worried about, afraid about, concerned about, the things that are on our mind, that they provide a window that helps us reflect on who we really are. But there's also this other aspect that's there as we begin to think, once we've fallen asleep, that what level of significance or importance do we give to our dreams? And why is that kind of our approach? That I don't know about you, but many times I wake up and I think, whoa, Kurt, you're crazier than even probably most people think. No, it's that whole understanding of, I think sometimes that within our modern understanding, we just look at our dreams as kind of like, oh, that was weird, or oh, I shouldn't have had that third helping of pizza, or maybe I shouldn't have watched that cop show or that horror movie before bed. That we blame external forces that are there, that just simply we see our dreams as just the things that are on our mind, and in some ways we just don't give much significance at all. Maybe not even to the point of saying, well, what is this saying that's about on my mind? But when we think about ancient people, and especially as we get into Daniel 2 today, then what level of significance did many ancient cultures give to their dreams? Then I think that they probably didn't just write all of them off. Many times dreams were seen to be those windows for the gods speaking and revealing to people the things that they needed to know. Sometimes especially vivid dreams or very repetitive dreams were viewed as those that somehow communicated something that needed to be said, needed to be heard, needed to be understood. But also even you just look at different cultures throughout time and their very approach to a world that is filled with gods and filled with spirits and filled with all of these connections, that there are ways that people need to look at or to do in order to connect and in some ways hear from these gods. And so you look at some religious ceremonies that were more like drunken festivals because that helped them connect, is that sometimes there wasn't just peace associated with the peace pipe. That what is it that we're pointing out? We're just pointing out within that understanding, it's not that they looked at every dream and every situation, but in a world that sees that there are spirits at work and God, and the gods are looking to communicate, that dreams were one of those. Now today, we see a real situation where the God, the Lord of heaven and earth, was trying to go ahead and communicate to Nebuchadnezzar that there was something about this dream that needed God's interpretation. And so let's get into our text today. So from Daniel chapter 2, in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. Now notice that, plural. It's not just that he had kind of a dream and woke up and just, I have to know. It's not just even maybe that it may not have just been one night. We don't know. But what does it say? That he had dreams and his spirit was troubled and his sleep left him. That's, what is it that we begin to find? But we see this connection that something about, excuse me, is that something about this very dream, this repetitive, intense dream, whatever it was, whether it was just the reality of it or the intensity of it or the repetition of it, something caught him and said, you need to know what this means. But above all, what happens is that he's troubled and his sleep left him. That not only is probably the dreams preventing him from sleeping well, but also maybe just that fear of even having more of the same dream with no answer of what it means was actually the very thing that was keeping him up. So then the king commanded that the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans be summoned to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king. And the king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know the dream. And then the Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servant the dream, and we will show the interpretation. So if we found out yet why the king is troubled? Well, obviously the dreams, but what is it about the dreams that are troubling him? Certainly that he doesn't have an answer, but again, what's the question that he's wanting to know? What is it that's really there causing him this intensity, this fear, this worry about what does this mean? See, I think that we're kind of strung along, building that tension, walking with Nebuchadnezzar as he desires to know what is this thing that weighs so heavy upon my heart. But so Nebuchadnezzar has a problem. So where does he turn to for the solution? Well, he turns to his court of royal advisors. But now, who makes up his court of royal advisors? That we heard the magicians, the sorcerers, the enchanters, and a strange term called the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans, Chaldea is a part of the wider Babylonian Empire, and this word here is likely used of the fact that that they were very attuned to things regarding interpretation of signs and stars and things. And so the NIV simply translate this, the astrologers. And so the Chaldeans, or the Chaldean people, the Babylonians, were very big into interpreting and understanding the signs out in nature, particularly the signs in the stars. And so these groups weren't all the same, that they might begin to have their own unique roles, that some interpreted and understood what was going on out there in nature, is that some, the enchanters, in a world filled with good and evil spirits, that they called upon to protect, to bring to bay, to manipulate and to work these things. That you look at the magicians, the sorcerers, that maybe they were some of those that sought to manipulate the gods to act in a good favor towards their situations. And so they were looking to, by the gods' powers, to accomplish what their desires would be. And so it's kind of an interesting mix that Nebuchadnezzar turns to. Then the king answered and said to the Chaldeans, "The word from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins." Wow, that got pretty heavy pretty quickly, didn't it? "But if you show the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore, show me the dream and its interpretation." I don't know if this is the inspiration for the Jerry Maguire line of "show me the money," but that's basically what the Nebuchadnezzar, the king, desires. Show me the dream and I will show you the money. Why is it, though, that he desires the dream and its interpretation? Let's see how his royal advisors respond. They answered a second time and said, "Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show you its interpretation." The king answered and said, "I know with certainty that you are trying to gain time, because you see that the word from me is firm. That if you do not make known the dream known to me, there is but one sentence for you. You have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the times change." Yeah, see, they hated springing forward also. They hated time change as well. That what is it that he sees? He sees them simply waiting for the shifting seasons to change. But Nebuchadnezzar says that I am firm and set. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can show me its interpretation. I mean, imagine just for a second if you were there and the king welcomed you in and said, "I had a dream, and I want to know what it's about, but I'm not going to tell you." I mean, can you imagine if Martin Luther King Jr. said, "I had a dream, but I really don't want to talk about it"? That would be a very different speech. But what is it that we see? We see him testing his very royal advisors. That why does he refuse to tell them his dream? That he wants them to show that they really do have the power to be able to interpret it. That there's something about this whole fortune-telling business that has somehow left the king knowing and understanding that he needs more. He needs more explanation. He needs more truth. He needs the very reality. And so what is it that the response that he gets? That the Chaldeans answered, and the king said, "There is not a man on earth who can meet the king's demands, for no great and powerful king has asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or a Chaldean. That the thing that the king asked is difficult, and no one can show it to the king except the gods whose dwelling is with flesh." Is not with flesh, sorry. So what is the reaction of the Babylonians? Babylonian wise men tell us about their trust in the gods and even their trust in their own power. They say it's impossible, it's too much, it's too great. They're not capable. And so what do we see? We begin to see a contrast set up. Is that how do they view the whole workings of things? That they'll spin their tales and they'll seek their signs, but when push comes to shove, that they are unwilling to stand upon the very thing that they preach. And so now comes this very contrast between the Babylonian wise men and that very young man of Daniel and his friends from Israel. That because of this, the king was very angry and very furious and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. So the decree went out, and the wise men were about to be killed, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Now just notice for a second, in chapter 1 it says that Daniel and his friends went through a 3-year training process. But in chapter 2, we're talking that we're in the 2nd year of Nebuchadnezzar. It seems like we've kind of backed up a little bit in the story. Chapter 1 is kind of a summary of the big picture of their training. Chapter 2 is of a particular event that happened within the lives of their training. Notice that they had to seek out Daniel and his companions because they weren't there with the rest of the wise men. That they were still trainees, minor leaguers. That they were rookies, if you will, and there's no need to have them invited to the party. And yet, the very punishment that comes down is going to come down on their head. Then Daniel replied with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. He declared to Arioch, the king's captain, "Why is the decree of the king so urgent?" And then Arioch made the matter known, and Daniel went in and requested to the king to appoint a time that he might show the interpretation of the king. Daniel got out his calendar and started connecting with the king's secretary and said, how does next Tuesday work?